But Claire wanted to come on the radio today because as we go into this holiday, supposedly celebrating peace on earth, the clouds of war yet again are gathering, this time over Syria and, of course, always over Iran. So, Claire?
Thank you, Michael, and aloha, America. I have been very concerned of late to be reading, and it's not one thing, but it seems to be a confluence of a number of things. There have been reports verified of NATO U.S. soldiers in Jordan on the border with Syria. There are also reports and actually an affirmation that the Turkish Prime Minister has very matter-of-factly said, oh, we're going to go in and invade when NATO tells us to. And, of course, Turkey is a NATO member. Now, what you can't do with special forces is you cannot have them in a holding pattern. It's too expensive, and it can really pull down morale. And there has been an announcement, which some of you may have seen, that the U.S. and Israel are going to be holding vast exercises in the spring of 2012 to, quote-unquote, counter the Iranian threat. I frankly don't think it's going to wait that long. I think what we may see, even though Syria has agreed to Arab League observers, I think we're going to see some sort of attack against Syria sooner rather than later because of the confluence of all this, plus the increase in tempo of the propaganda war drums that I've been hearing. Bad Syria, bad Syria. Well, a lot of the people in Syria, if they have a chance to be listened to, will tell you that these people are outside agitators, including hired mercenaries who were used in Libya. All of this coming together makes me think that possibly at a point in time when the American populace is definitely distracted between Christmas, football, New Year, and kind of sedated by the tryptophan and the turkey, if you will, we may see some sort of attack that is going to be characterized by Western media as a civil war or a civil uprising on the part of the Syrian people. And, of course, NATO is going to go in there and say we have to protect. Now, if this is the same kind of protection that was given Libyan civilians, the people in Syria are in very deep kimchi, as we say here in the islands, are very deep trouble. You do not, in a humane way, bomb someone in order to save them or leave those left standing maimed for life and having to deal with the consequences of exposure to depleted uranium. So, yes, Mike, I am concerned, and I'd kind of like your thoughts in this direction as well.
Well, we're basically in a situation where the United States government has, under various pretexts, whether it's weapons of mass destruction or humanitarian aid or whatever, has invaded something like 10 nations here in the last few years on 2 different continents. Technically, we're already in a world war, and the United States is basically starting it. We're the bad guys this time, and I know that's not something that you all want to hear as you get ready for your holiday greetings.
And we're just not on the right side of history right now.
No, we aren't, because every major war since the beginning of the 20th century ultimately was lost by the nation that initiated it, started it.
And I would like our listeners and our viewers to think about a couple of things here. What exactly did we win in the war and occupation of Iraq? What did U.S. citizens actually win in that war where, gosh, the price tag right now, I've seen all sorts of figures all over the place, but $1 trillion worth of taxpayer money. What have the American people won? I'm looking at this and I can't see a thing that the American people have won as a result of this war. We are no safer than we were before. There are reports and analyses coming up indicating that once the U.S. leaves, sectarian strife is going to be worse than it was before between the Shia and the Sunni. And, of course, you know, one has to wonder what the State Department was thinking in the original de-Baathification program when the occupation began, because what happened was that they took the Sunni people out of government and out of military and replaced them with Shia. And to whom are the Shia close? The Shia of Iran. I don't know who was thinking about that when that whole thing came down.
I don't think they were really thinking in terms of an overview. It was always just the immediate objective, which was, George Bush came into office wanting a war with Iraq and not even sure how he was going to get it. But that was the agenda from day one. And it was always about, selling more weapons and plunging countries deeper into debt, because that's really what is behind all of these wars, is plunging nations into debt. If you've got nation A and nation B and they're out of debt and living peacefully, bankers cannot stand that. So they hire public relations firms to go into Nation A and say, Nation B is coming to get you. They smell funny. They abuse their dogs. They're cruel to their women. They're evil people, and we must destroy them. And so Nation A gets talked into attacking Nation B using weapons that they have to borrow money for from the bankers. Nation B is saying, what the heck is this going on? And the bankers go to Nation B and say, yeah, you're under attack here. We'll loan you money so you've got weapons to fight back.
And the only entities, if you will, that quote-unquote won in Iraq that I can see would be, drumroll please, ExxonMobil, which started oil development in 2009.
Well, they didn't even get all the contracts they thought they were going to get. If you go back and you look at Dick Cheney's Energy Task Force, the Secret Energy Task Force, and Judicial Watch succeeded in prying loose the documents and found out they were maps of Mideast oil fields.
Right.
And it was all this huge plan to conquer all the Mideast oil. That has not succeeded. That is an absolute failure. The public reasons given for the war were all lies, so those objectives could not be achieved. The war is an absolute failure. And by the way, Obama did not pull our troops out of Iraq. The new government of Iraq kicked the United States out. They basically said, if you're on the ground January 1, we will start holding war crimes trials.
Absolutely. And the other factor to consider here is Muqtada al-Sadr, who is Shia and a religious leader in the community, very highly respected. And he was saying some time back, and currently as well, that his organization, which chose a path of political action rather than military, will go back to a military attack if the United States is not out. So we got run out of Dodge really intensely there.
We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back.
And I'd also like our readers during this holiday season to think about the following. We have been in Afghanistan for a decade now, right? 10 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Longer than we were in World War II.
And the question that I have to ask, and that needs to be put to our congressional representatives, what or how have we won in Afghanistan? And if
opium.
Well,
opium.
Yes.
The opium is flowing.
But if there is a professional military person who can tell me with a straight face, by any metric, that we have quote-unquote won anything in Afghanistan, except that the drug trade and the weapons trade people are prospering like crazy, I sure as heck can't see it. And it looks as though...
Well, I can actually answer that question for you, because if you look at a map of the region, what we're doing nation by nation by nation, and Syria is next, and Pakistan's probably going to be after that, is they're completing the encirclement of Iran.
Yes.
The biggest problem the United States is facing right now is to keep Russia from supplying Iran during the attack. And one of the reasons we're still in Afghanistan is to prevent Russia from sending in ground convoys through Afghanistan. The reason we keep helping kick up all these little civil wars in the Georgian region is to shut down those tunnels coming through the Caucasus Mountains. And so Iran would be forced, or rather Russia would be forced to supply Iran by air, which is very expensive, as our people are finding out now, trying to supply Afghanistan by air. And, of course, the U.S. and Israel are going to have air superiority over Iran. So that's part of the plan. The end result is Iran. Israel has been telling the United States government for years, you will smash Iran for us. And the U.S. government is saying, I hear and I obey. And so a huge part of the strategic planning is that we're basically, they're taking over these nations that border Iran in order to reduce the ability of China and Russia to supply Iran, or to cut off escape routes, or basically to provide more forward basing for a coordinated attack coming from multiple directions at the same time. It's all about smashing Iran.
And Mike, I've noticed that I was reading today that Russia is taking steps to join the conflict militarily should the U.S. and or Israel attack.
Yes.
So I would like to hope that those in the bowels of power in D.C. and Tel Aviv,
emphasis in bowels,
yes, are thinking about this, a war with a nuclear-armed Russia for the neutralizing of yet another one of Israel's existential threats. And right now, that seems to be just about everyone in the region. They have not been doing a good job at working well with others, the Israelis and the Israeli government.
Iran is not an existential threat to Israel. Iran is not in the business of invading and attacking other countries. Mm-hmm. Israel is simply, as a culture, paranoid. Mm-hmm. They're suffering paranoid delusions. Everybody's an enemy. We've got to kill all of them. I mean, Alan Dershowitz yesterday was saying that the mere possibility that Iran might someday be a hostile threat to Israel is moral and legal justification for Israel to attack Iran right now.
Oh, give that man some more calcium, magnesium, please.
Well, the problem is Dershowitz doesn't seem to understand that same logic applies the other way.
Yes.
From Iran's point of view, you've got a nuclear-armed Israel with a history of belligerence against all of their neighbors. Mm-hmm. You know, from Iran's point of view, are they not justified attacking Israel to prevent an eventual attack by Israel?
But they won't, because the Iranian leadership is many things. Stupid isn't one of them. They understand with absolute clarity, Mike, that if they should attempt to attack Israel or any American asset in the region, that whole country is going to be glowing green glass from a nuclear attack.
Well, unfortunately, Iran's leadership has to understand that it doesn't matter what they do any longer. Israel has told the United States to attack, and attack the United States will do. It's Iraq all over again.
Yes.
No matter what Saddam Hussein did, it was never good enough. There was always another provocation. There was always another reason we had to go into Iraq. Mm-hmm. You know, the United States is invading and attacking and conquering other people's countries. And they're just shoveling this bovine excrement excuses at you and saying, if you are a patriot, if you love your flag, you will believe the bovine excrement we're shoveling at you.
Well, I can't. And neither can you, and neither can our listeners and readers. And there was an article, I believe, yesterday by an American general who said that we are now ready to deal militarily with Iran. Yeah. And my response to that was why? Since becoming an Islamic Republic in 1979, what major war has Iran instigated? And the answer is none. Zero. Nada.
Not
zip.
in 200 years.
No.
Not in 200 years.
And again, you know...
Well, they're saying we're going to attack Iran because that's what Israel is telling to do. Israel is telling the United States government, you attack Iran for us, or we'll blow the whistle on who really did 9/11, and it'll be worse for you than it is for us. Neener, 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 go kill them for us. We'll be right back after these. I mean, have you noticed that all of these world wars, you know, started at about the same time we got the Federal Reserve?
Yep.
And that's because every time the United States government gets itself into a major financial mess, it gets out of it by getting into a world war. Crash of 1907, get into World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, we're already at war in 10 countries that we know of on 2 continents. And that's how they're going to get out. They're going to start World War III. They're going to crank up World War III. We're already in it because they can't think of any better ideas. And nobody has the courage to stand up and say the problem is the private central bank model. It is a failed experiment. The best thing that you can do right now is to talk to everybody you know about what's going on, about your concerns. Especially, please seek out people who don't have the benefit of a computer link-up,
right?
Who are still plugged into the matrix that we call the television networks and the corporate media. And you need to start out by saying, you do understand there were never weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And once you get him to acknowledge that the corporate media and the government lied to America about the weapons of mass destruction, then you can lead him on step by step to the idea that lying by the government and the media isn't an unusual thing. They do it all the time. Johnson with the torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, the mine in Havana Harbor, all this other stuff. And, you know, just don't overwhelm them and don't trigger off their defense mechanism because they still believe in the flag and, you're a bunch of crazy hippie type things.
A little bit at a time.
A little bit at a time,
right.
and basically just say, do you want another world war? And, we're being lied into it. We're the aggressor. And not only is that working against an eventual American victory, but we don't have the boots on the ground, we don't have the people, we don't have the money, and we certainly do not have the manufacturing capacity to sustain a major world war. We're going to lose this one. But the bankers who are behind these wars don't care. That's why Brown Brothers Harriman, who still have offices there on Wall Street, they were financing Hitler's rise to power because they wanted another major world war. They didn't care which side was going to win or lose.
Absolutely.